Hey everyone, this is Quinn from Quinn's Cars, and we are talking about a really controversial but really interesting topic, electric vehicles. Some people hate them, some people love them. Let's dive into it. People might be surprised to learn, I know I was surprised to learn, that the first electric vehicle, technically, it was more of an electric carriage type vehicle, was in the 1830s. It was developed by an inventor named Robert Anderson, and it was kind of described more as like a parlor trick. It wasn't really that powerful, couldn't really do much, but it was technically an electric vehicle. It didn't have the rechargeable battery like batteries do now, and especially with its lead acid type battery, it was extremely heavy. For the last 150 years, steam power had been the main source of power throughout history, especially after the Industrial Revolution. The important thing to note, though, is with steam-powered engines and steam-powered vehicles, the combustibility, the efficiency was just not there yet. They had developed these engines that were reliable over time, but needed to consume such an incredible amount of wood, coal, and water that they needed to come up with something that was more innovative and that had more efficiency over time. Even though that first electric vehicle was more of a prototype, very basic, primitive type vehicle, it got people's minds kind of turning into what the future could look like. And in 1996, GM came out with the GM EV1. The GM EV1, they only really leased or sold about 1,100 of them. It had 70 to 100 miles of range and had about 137 horsepower. So it wasn't that powerful, it wasn't that efficient, it wasn't that exciting yet, but it was kind of the first tackle by a big manufacturer of an electric vehicle. That was even before Tesla. There had been innovations from that first electric vehicle until the 90s, but really it was the GM EV1 that had a big company backing a serious car that had some performance numbers that were comparable with cars of its time. I think when most people think of the origin of electric cars, they have to think of Tesla. And in 2008, Tesla Motors came out with the Tesla Roadster. The Tesla Roadster was a really cool looking car. It was on like a Lotus Elise platform. It was a coupe two-door style, and it had 211 pound-feet of torque, 248 horsepower, and had a range of around 244 miles, 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds. It was the first time that there was a company that took a vehicle with its performance and efficiency higher than vehicles of its time. It was really a step in the direction of something that could exceed a economy car in MPGs and a sports car in performance potentially. Tesla was kind of the first company to really take on the electric vehicle seriously and bring something that was innovative, powerful, futuristic, and exciting for the first time into the market. Now, fast forwarding to 2025, you have a study shown by ourworldindata.org. It shows that 1 in 5 new cars sold in 2024 were electric. Now, America, of course, is behind in the trend, but it looks like 92% of new cars in Norway were electric and 50% of new cars in China were electric. Those stats are combined with hybrid cars because it has that electric component as well. But it really is going to show that the future of cars and automobiles is leaning very heavily in the electric direction. One of the things that I've learned as I've been researching these electric cars is how they work. So the way that these electric vehicles source their power is they gather it from stations, and you can either have a home station or a public station, and it gives you basically a certain amount of time that fuels your battery pack in kilowatts per hour. Now that charging time can come in a level 1, 2, or 3 charge, And it really ranges. The level 1 is 24 plus hours if you're trying to charge. Level 3, you're gonna get a 100-mile range within 35 minutes. So with how far it's come in about a couple decades is pretty significant, but even with 100 miles of range in 35 minutes, it's still nowhere near comparable with an internal combustion engine's gas fill-up. An electric vehicle can either have one motor or it can have multiple motors. You have a normal battery that starts the vehicle, but the traction battery is what moves the vehicle. And when you're plugging it in, you're charging that traction battery and that original battery. Battery size is going to depend on the type of car that you have, but it can range anywhere from 50 to 100 kilowatt hour battery size, and that's going to range from anywhere from 200 to 400 miles of range. And then if you get into the higher echelon of electric vehicles, you can get 500 plus miles of range. Or if you have a DeLorean, you can just go 88 miles per hour and charge the flux capacitor. What type of EV you should get is, of course, subjective. It depends on your needs as a person. Do you want something with a little more performance? Do you want something with a little bit more cargo, more range, more acceleration? It really depends on what you want. If you're getting an electric vehicle, you can expect quick acceleration kind of no matter what, because again, with electric power, it's instant. So when you send that electricity from the battery into the motors, it turns the wheels, and that's instant. It's not like an internal combustion engine where it actually has to wait for the air and the fuel to mix, combust, and then send that energy out into the crankshaft to turn the wheels. If you're getting an SUV, it seems like the Tesla Model X, Model Y seems to be a very popular choice. If you're getting a sedan, there's a Chinese company called BYD, which actually stands for Build Your Dreams, and very strange name, but that's just kind of what they went with. And they seem to be a really interesting competitor and an up-and-coming competitor to some of the highest brands in the world. And if you're going to get a sedan or an SUV, but really seems like they're sedan focused and like city driving focused, that seems like a really good choice if you're going to go that route. If you were to go truck, I'd say Rivian is probably going to be the best brand for design and for hauling and towing power. If you're looking at the completely other end of the spectrum where people have so much money they don't know what to do with it and they've kind of lost their minds, you have something called Rimac. And they're actually, they're like the Frankensteins of the electric market. They're over there creating crazy experiments with crazy horsepower, crazy numbers, and their cars are beautiful, but they're insane and ridiculous. That being said, if you have $2.5 million burning a hole in your piggy bank and you need over 2,000 horsepower to drive little Timmy to school, then the Rimac Navara R is free. Now, another big question, costs. So if you're looking at the average internal combustion engine vehicle, and we'll just say gas-powered vehicle, the average new car cost for that is $49,000. If you're looking at the average new car price for an electric vehicle, you're looking at around $58,000. So already you kind of have an idea of the difference between numbers starting out. If you're charging at home, it's going to be anywhere from 3 cents to 20 cents per mile. And that really just depends on which level of charging you have, that 1, 2, or 3. In the standard level 2 charging, it's going to be anywhere from 26 to 37 cents per mile. And while that is really affordable, again, it's going to depend on the time of day that you charge, because the interesting thing is that the time of day that you charge actually depends on the price as well. Because if you're going to be charging a little bit later at night, then you can actually get a cheaper price, and that's because of the usage on the grid. It really depends on if you're going to put a little bit more strain on the grid, then it's going to cost a little bit more. But at night, when less people are using the grid, then you can actually get a cheaper price, which is really interesting. One of the convenient things about the electric vehicles that you could do is you can actually go into the screens and submenus in your car and change it to where you can actually pick what time you want your vehicle to charge so you can get that cheaper price. An interesting thing to consider though is if you're looking at a gas-powered vehicle, you're looking at around $2,100 a year in cost for that. But then when you look at the charging cost, you're looking at around a few $100s. $650 seems to be average. Again, I think the reason why electric vehicles are up and coming, and especially becoming more popular, but still don't have that headway over gas-powered vehicles yet, or internal combustion engine vehicles yet, is because the costs don't quite offset in a way that makes sense yet. The thing about gas-powered cars is, the good is you have mechanics everywhere that have knowledge of them. You have quick fill-up times. If you go to a gas station, you have gas stations everywhere. The bad thing is the fuel does cost a little bit more. There is more frequent maintenance on a gas-powered vehicle, and you have something like spark plugs, transmission servicing, things that you wouldn't have to deal with if you had an electric vehicle. That being said, with electric vehicles, you're going to have a little bit more of an upfront cost. You're going to have, if you want to install a home charging system, which seems to be very heavily recommended, it depends on your house capabilities. It depends on if you want to spend another $2,000+ to get that set up. And then another thing too is there's going to be less maintenance over time with electric vehicles, but when you do need maintenance, it's going to be expensive because, again, that battery really being the heart and controlling everything also means that when it goes out, that heart is going to be expensive. Another thing, and the reason why I think this video is so important and why studying electric vehicles is so important, is the pros and cons with what having an electric vehicle means and what it really costs, and not just as a monetary cost, as a environmental cost. And a lot of the reason why people get these vehicles is because of the environmental impact. When doing research on electric vehicles, there are contradicting points on both sides. Yes, the zero emissions are going to, of course, help with reducing greenhouse gases, helping with the atmosphere, and thus helping with animals, plants, and the land. And that's super important. The flip side of that is to mine the lithium that is required for these batteries. You also kind of got to destroy the planet a little bit. And that's where the catch-22 comes in, is you're saving the environment while you're driving the vehicle, but the problem is getting the lithium requires not only evaporating large bodies of water, which is toxic to the environment, is harmful to ecosystems, and destroys habitats for wildlife, but also it doesn't seem like there is a solution for disposing of the lithium either. Not only is it a significant fire hazard, and with wildfires kind of raging across the country, that is a serious problem, not to mention, of course, the toxicity of lithium, and trying to dispose of that in other ecosystems is harmful to the environment as well. Another consideration on if you would want an electric vehicle or not may be performance. And again, there is good and bad with the performance as well. On one hand, you have the instant acceleration, you have the efficiency of the charging, giving you more mileage over a longer amount of time with better acceleration and usually with better power. On the flip side of that, most car enthusiasts and people that enjoy driving have an issue with how quiet it is, how many screens are in the vehicle. The fact that if you want to get into the AC, you may have to access 12 submenus and 3 iPads to try to get to that submenu. It's not only the user interface that seems to be a problem, not only generationally, but just with enthusiasts in general. But in addition to it being kind of a confusing setup on the interior, and maybe ironically over complex with its minimalism, but also with the quiet cabin experience and the fast acceleration, a lot of people feel like even with the performance, you're sacrificing excitement, engagement, and really a feel for the road. In some insane cars like that Rimac Nevera R, where you have 2,000 plus horsepower, you can't help but think that of course that's going to be an engaging experience. But when you compare it to something like a Koenigsegg or a Hennessy Venom with similar horsepower and similar numbers, it makes you wonder is that going to be good enough? Is the horsepower and torque going to be good enough to make up for the fact that you can't hear or feel much as you're driving? At the end of the day, the car enthusiast in me wants to say that there is no competition and that internal combustion engine vehicles are the only way to go, and that is going to always be the most exciting, most engaging way to drive. The truth is, even in 2025, it is the case that there are enough contradicting facts with electrical vehicles that between cost of ownership, environmental factors, driving feel, and where they sit in the market as far as convenience, finding that charging location. I mean, I think I have maybe 2 or 3 within 20 minutes in any given direction in my hometown, and I live in a decent city. It's something to consider where the technology is still not quite there yet. Of course, if you want something extremely techy, if you want something extremely practical, if you want something that is fast but not necessarily loud and exciting in that way, then maybe an electric car is for you. You can't deny that it is going to eventually be better in the future. I think once we get a handle on how to dispose of lithium, if we still need lithium, if there are other ways that we can source that energy more efficiently, and if we can more efficiently get more charging stations out there, I think the presence of internal combustion engines is going to dwindle away, and rightfully so. I think it's easy to think that if you want an engaging and exciting car, then you have to get a manual with a V8. And nowadays, that's just becoming less and less of a thing. Of course, that's going to be an exciting vehicle to drive. But I think there is a new generation of vehicles, technology, and the way people think about vehicles that may change the way that people want to drive. People that had the manual V8s back in the 1960s, if you want the muscle car experience, you have to have some muscle in the car. And I totally understand that. But I also see where they're coming from, going from the innovation of not only the manual V8, but the automatic 4-cylinder that has now more horsepower than the stick V8 from the 1960s. There is something to say with the innovation of getting more performance, more torque, more better handling, better gas mileage, literally not sacrificing anything for the best of both worlds. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think of electric vehicles, when you guys think electrical vehicles will be it for the future, or if you prefer and will always prefer internal combustion engine vehicles. Until next time, bye.